They slammed him against the hood of the car, calling him a criminal in front of everyone. But one phone call later, their whole world came crashing down. Marcus Brown had just stepped out of a cozy neighborhood coffee shop, the rich smell of roasted beans still clinging to his jacket, when his world suddenly shifted. A sharp screech of tires cut through the calm morning, and two police cruisers swerved to a stop beside him. Before he could even take a step, two uniformed officers jumped out, hands on their weapons, shouting for him to raise his hands. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, startled, but the question only seemed to agitate them further. They closed in, one gripping his arm roughly, twisting it behind his back while the other patted him down. Passers-by slowed, their curious stares quickly turning to concerned glances. Some took out their phones, recording the scene. Marcus, dressed in a crisp navy suit and polished shoes, looked every bit the professional man he was, but the officers treated him like a dangerous fugitive. "We got our guy," one muttered with smug satisfaction. The accusation came next, an armed robbery at a store just a few blocks away. Marcus blinked in disbelief. He had been in that coffee shop for nearly an hour, chatting with the barista, yet they didn't ask a single question about where he had been. Instead, they spoke over him, their tone laced with condescension, as if his voice didn't matter. Marcus tried to explain, calmly insisting they had the wrong man. But the more he spoke, the less they seemed to listen. They shoved him toward the cruiser, cuffing his wrists tightly, the cold metal biting into his skin. In that moment, it wasn't the arrest itself that stung the most. It was the look in their eyes. They had already decided who he was before they even knew his name, and nothing he said seemed able to change that. Marcus sat in the back of the police cruiser, the metal cuffs digging deeper into his wrists every time the car hit a bump. Through the tinted glass, he watched familiar streets roll past, streets where he had grown up, streets where he had worked hard to build a name for himself. Now, every face that glanced at the passing squad car would see only a suspect. His phone vibrated in his pocket, but his hands were bound, and one of the officers quickly took it, tossing it onto the dashboard without a word. The station smelled of stale coffee and old paper when they dragged him inside, leading him past rows of desks and into a cramped interrogation room. They didn't offer him water, didn't tell him his rights, didn't even bother to ask for his side of the story. Instead, one officer leaned across the table, slamming down a blurry security camera still. The man in the image wore a hoodie, face half covered, but to them that was enough. Marcus studied the photo, the corners of his mouth tightening. "That's not me," he said firmly. The younger officer scoffed, muttering something under his breath about stories they all tell. Marcus took a slow breath. Years in business had taught him the value of staying calm under pressure. But this wasn't a boardroom, and these weren't negotiators. Still, there was one advantage he had that they didn't know about. As the older officer stepped out, Marcus looked directly at the remaining cop. "Before you make a mistake you can't undo," he said evenly. "I suggest you let me make one phone call." The officer smirked, clearly amused. "And who are you going to call? A lawyer?" Marcus held his gaze unblinking. "Something like that," he replied. Deep down, he already knew this single call would change everything. The officer finally shoved an old phone across the table. The cord stretched and twisted like it hadn't been used in years. Marcus picked it up slowly, dialing a number from memory. One he hadn't used in a long time, but one he knew by heart. It rang once before a deep, steady voice answered. "Marcus? What's wrong?" Marcus didn't waste time. "I'm sitting in an interrogation room downtown. They've got the wrong guy. I need it handled." There was no hesitation on the other end. "Stay put." The line clicked dead. Marcus set the receiver down, his expression unreadable. The younger cop leaned against the wall, smirking. "That's it? Thought you were gonna call the president or something." Marcus didn't respond. Outside the room, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow at first, then quicker, heavier. The door burst open, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Two men in dark suits entered, flashing badges so quickly the officer barely caught a glimpse. "He's coming with us?" one of them said in a voice that left no room for argument. The officer stammered, looking between Marcus and the strangers. "But he's a suspect." "Not anymore," the taller agent cut in. "You've made a serious mistake." Before anyone could argue further, Marcus was uncuffed, the cold steel falling from his wrists with a dull clink on the table. The agents guided him out, their presence sending a ripple of unease through the entire station. Officers stopped mid-sentence, some stepping aside instinctively, as if they just realized they were in the wrong room with the wrong man. Marcus didn't look back. As they stepped into the sunlight outside, one agent leaned closer. "Headquarters isn't happy. They want names." Marcus gave a small nod, his calm demeanor hiding the storm that was about to hit the department. The game had just changed, and now it was his move. As the black SUV pulled away from the station, Marcus sat silently in the back seat, the city passing in blurred streaks of light. The two agents said little, speaking only in short, coded exchanges over their earpieces. After a few minutes, the taller one turned to Marcus. "The director wants you on a secure line as soon as we reach headquarters. This incident is already being escalated." Marcus gave a slow nod, his mind working through every detail of the past few hours. The agents weren't just escorting him, they were shielding him. Across town, in that cramped interrogation room, the cops who had humiliated him were beginning to realize what they'd done. A phone on the desk rang. The sergeant answered, his face draining of color as he listened. "Yes, sir. I understand. Yes, immediately." When he hung up, his voice was tight. "Get me every report on Marcus Reynolds. Now." One of the younger officers whispered, "Who is he?" No one answered. Back in the SUV, Marcus finally spoke. "They treated me like I was nothing. That's not going to slide." The agent in the passenger seat met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "It won't. The department is already under investigation. Your call just moved it to top priority." 10 minutes later, they pulled into a secure underground garage. Marcus was led into a sleek, glass-walled office where a phone sat waiting. He picked it up, and the voice on the other end was firm. "Marcus, I've read the preliminary report. Those officers crossed every line. I'm authorizing a full internal sweep, effective immediately." Marcus allowed himself the smallest smile. This wasn't revenge, it was accountability, and it was about to happen fast. Outside the office, agents began moving with purpose. Somewhere in a police station across town, the countdown to their reckoning had just begun. By the next morning, the police station was in chaos. Internal affairs agents swarmed the building, pulling files, downloading body cam footage, and quietly escorting officers into private rooms for questioning. The cops who had harassed Marcus the night before now sat in those very same chairs, sweat beading on their foreheads. Their earlier arrogance had been replaced by a silent dread. The sergeant tried to defend their actions, but the evidence was clear: racial profiling, unlawful detention, and violation of multiple protocols. Word spread quickly through the department. The man they had mistreated was not only innocent, but a decorated federal security advisor with close ties to the Justice Department. In the city's newsrooms, headlines began to form, and by noon, the story was breaking on every major network. "Racial bias leads to major federal investigation," one headline read. Outside, cameras flashed as reporters gathered, demanding answers. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner office at the federal building, Marcus watched the coverage on a flat-screen TV. He didn't gloat, didn't smile. He simply sipped his coffee, knowing justice was moving exactly as it should. A knock at the door brought in the director herself. "Marcus," she said, "those officers have been suspended pending further investigation. The department is facing a federal audit. This isn't just about you. This will change how they operate." Marcus nodded, finally leaning back in his chair. "Good. No one else should have to go through what I did." That evening, as he stepped out into the cool air, his phone buzzed. It was a text from one of the agents. "It's done. They'll never forget your name." Marcus slipped the phone into his pocket and walked away, the city lights reflecting in his calm eyes. He hadn't just cleared his own name. He'd made sure the system felt the weight of its own actions. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with your friends. Subscribe to Black Stories for more powerful and unforgettable tales.